You think you know reality. You've been told to take the red pill and see the truth, or take the blue pill and stay comfortable. But what if I told you that both pills are just another illusion? What if the real power players never took either pill because they understood something far more dangerous? Niccolo Machiavelli, the grandfather of dark psychology, never needed a choice between red and blue. He saw reality as it truly is, a game where perception is currency and truth is whatever serves your power. While everyone else argues about which pill reveals reality, Machiavelli would laugh at the entire premise. He knew that reality isn't something you discover, it's something you create. The masses need pills to feel awakened, to feel special, to feel like they've escaped the matrix. But the true architects of power don't escape the matrix. They build it. They control it. They decide what red means, what blue means, and who gets to choose. Today, I'm going to show you the Machiavellian protocol, the framework that transcends this false binary. You'll learn why choosing either pill makes you a player in someone else's game. And more importantly, you'll discover how to become the one who designs the game itself. This isn't about waking up. This is about never being asleep in the first place. Welcome to the Machiavelli protocol, where we dissect the psychology of power that society desperately wants to keep hidden. I'm your host, and if you're here, you're already questioning the narratives that keep most people imprisoned. But questioning isn't enough. Understanding the mechanics of manipulation, control, and strategic reality creation, that's where true power lies. Before we dive deep into Machiavelli's framework, I need you to do something. Drop a comment right now, telling me which pill you think you've taken, red, blue, or neither. And more importantly, tell me who you think benefits from you making that choice. This interaction isn't just engagement, it's the first test of whether you're truly thinking strategically or just following another script. The algorithm loves comments, but I love seeing who among you actually grasps that every choice presented to you serves someone's agenda. Now, Machiavelli wrote The Prince over 500 years ago, yet his insights into human nature remain more relevant than ever. Why? Because human psychology hasn't evolved. The same fears, desires, and cognitive biases that ruled Renaissance Italy rule your social media feed today. The only thing that's changed is the sophistication of the delivery system. So let's begin dismantling the illusion. The red pill, blue pill metaphor has become a cultural obsession, a modern mythology that promises enlightenment through choice. But Machiavelli would immediately identify this as a control mechanism, not a liberation tool. Think about it strategically. When someone presents you with a binary choice, they've already won. They've constrained your thinking to two predetermined outcomes, both of which they control. The red pill promises harsh truths about society, relationships, and power structures. Take it, and you join a community of the awakened who see through the lies. The blue pill offers comfort, ignorance, and the safety of societal acceptance. Take it, and you remain a happy, unconscious participant in the system. Machiavelli would ask the question nobody wants to hear. Who benefits from you identifying with either choice? When you take the red pill, you become predictable. You adopt a specific worldview, consume specific content, and join specific communities. You've been categorized, monetized, and your rebellion has been commodified. When you take the blue pill, you're equally controlled, just through different mechanisms. You're the consumer, the compliant citizen, the person who doesn't ask uncomfortable questions. Either way, you're playing a role in someone else's script. Machiavelli's actual approach was far more sophisticated. He observed reality without the need for validation from any ideological framework. He studied what actually works, not what should work according to moral philosophy or social conditioning. He recognized that power operates according to principles that exist independent of our feelings about them. Gravity doesn't care if you believe in it. Neither do the laws of social power. The Machiavellian protocol begins with a fundamental recognition that most people desperately avoid. You are already in a game, whether you acknowledge it or not. Every social interaction, every career move, every relationship operates according to power dynamics. Pretending otherwise doesn't exempt you from the game. It just makes you a less effective player. The red pill community often prides itself on seeing this game. But seeing the game while still playing by someone else's rules isn't freedom. It's just a different form of slavery with better lighting. Machiavelli would never take a pill offered by someone else. He would ask who created the pills, what their incentives are, and what reality they're trying to construct. Then he would decide whether to play along, create his own option, or manipulate the entire framework to his advantage. This is the difference between reactive and proactive power. Most people react to the choices presented to them. They feel empowered by choosing between option A and option B, but true power lies in creating option C, or better yet, designing the entire menu. Think about the current social landscape. You're told to choose between political tribes, ideological camps, and social identities. Each choice comes with a pre-packaged worldview, a set of enemies, and a community of allies. This isn't accidental. This is social engineering at scale. When people are divided into predictable categories, they become manageable. Their behavior becomes predictable. Their outrage becomes monetizable. Their energy gets channeled into conflicts that don't threaten actual power structures. Machiavelli observed this pattern in Renaissance Italy, where powerful families kept the population divided to maintain control. The same principle applies today, just with better technology and more sophisticated propaganda. So, what's the alternative? The Machiavellian approach requires something most people find terrifying: intellectual independence. Not the performative kind where you signal your uniqueness while conforming to alternative group norms. Real independence means being comfortable with ambiguity, contradiction, and strategic flexibility. It means your beliefs serve your objectives, rather than your objectives serving your beliefs. This sounds cold because it is. Machiavelli wasn't interested in comforting truths. He was interested in effective truths. And the most effective truth is this: reality is negotiable for those who understand the negotiation process. But here's where it gets really interesting. Most people think Machiavelli was simply advocating for ruthless self-interest and amoral manipulation. That's a surface-level reading that misses his actual sophistication. Machiavelli understood that sustainable power requires understanding the psychology of those who lead, influence, or compete against. He knew that appearing moral often serves your interests better than being openly amoral. He recognized that sometimes generosity is more strategic than cruelty, and sometimes the reverse is true. The key is having the wisdom to know which approach serves your objectives in each specific context. This is what the red pill, blue pill framework completely misses. It assumes there's one correct way to see reality, one set of truths that apply universally. Machiavelli knew that reality is contextual, relational, and fundamentally shaped by perception. What's true in one context becomes false in another. What works with one audience fails with another. The amateur seeks universal principles they can apply mechanically. The master understands that principles are tools to be deployed strategically, not religious doctrines to be followed blindly. Consider how this applies to modern social dynamics. The red pill community often promotes specific strategies for relationships, career, and social interaction. Some of these strategies work for some people in some contexts, but treating them as universal laws is the opposite of Machiavellian thinking. Machiavelli would assess each situation individually. Who are the players? What are their motivations? What are the constraints? What are the opportunities? Only after this assessment would he choose his approach. And he would remain flexible enough to change that approach if circumstances shifted. This requires a level of cognitive flexibility that most people find exhausting. It's much easier to adopt a fixed worldview and apply it to every situation. It's comforting to believe you've found the truth, and now you just need to follow the script. But comfort is the enemy of power. The moment you become too attached to any ideology, you've created a vulnerability that others can exploit. Machiavelli himself wrote that a prince must learn how not to be good and to use this knowledge or not according to necessity. Notice the nuance here. It's not about being evil. It's about having the capability for actions outside conventional morality and the wisdom to deploy them strategically. Most people are slaves to their self-image. They need to see themselves as good, moral, or enlightened. This need makes them predictable and controllable. If you know someone will always choose the moral option, you can manipulate them by framing your desired outcome as the moral choice. If you know someone has taken the red pill and adopted that identity, you can predict their reactions and use them accordingly. The Machiavellian operates without these constraints, not because they're immoral, but because they recognize morality itself as a tool, not a master. This is the reality check that goes beyond any pill. You are not your beliefs. You are not your ideology. You are not your identity. These are all tools you use to navigate reality, and tools should be chosen based on effectiveness, not emotional attachment. Now I know what some of you are thinking. Doesn't this lead to nihilism? If nothing is true and everything is strategic, what's the point? This is where most people misunderstand Machiavelli completely. Machiavelli wasn't a nihilist. He had clear objectives. He wanted Florence to be strong, unified, and free from foreign domination. What made him Machiavellian was his willingness to use any effective means to achieve those objectives. He didn't confuse his goals with his methods. This is the critical distinction. Your objectives can be deeply meaningful, even noble, but your attachment to specific methods, beliefs, or identities will only limit your effectiveness. The red pill community often makes this mistake. They've identified real problems in modern society, genuine issues with relationships, masculinity, and social dynamics. But then they become so attached to their framework that they can't adapt when circumstances change. They've replaced one rigid ideology with another. Machiavelli would never make this error. He observed that fortuna, fortune or circumstance, controls about half of human affairs. The other half is determined by virtue, which doesn't mean virtue in the moral sense. It means capability, adaptability, and strategic excellence. The person with virtue can navigate changing circumstances because they're not rigidly attached to any single approach. They read the situation and respond appropriately. Think about how this applies to your own life. How many opportunities have you missed because they didn't fit your self-image? How many times have you made suboptimal choices because you were committed to being consistent with your stated beliefs? How often have you prioritized being right over being effective? These are the costs of ideological rigidity. And in a world where power is constantly shifting, rigidity is a fatal weakness. The blue pill masses are rigid in their conformity. The red pill awakened are rigid in their rebellion. Both groups are equally controllable because both are predictable. The Machiavellian is fluid, adapting to circumstances while maintaining focus on core objectives. This fluidity is often mistaken for inconsistency or lack of principles. But it's actually the highest form of strategic thinking. Your principles should serve you. You shouldn't serve your principles. Now let's apply this to a concrete example. Imagine you're in a workplace where office politics determine advancement more than competence. The blue pill approach is to keep your head down, work hard, and hope merit is recognized. The red pill approach is to recognize the game, become cynical, and either play ruthlessly or opt out entirely. The Machiavellian approach is more nuanced. First, accurately assess the power structure. Who actually makes decisions? What do they value? What are their insecurities and ambitions? Second, determine your actual objective. Do you want advancement in this organization? Or is your goal something else entirely? Third, select the strategy that best serves your objective given the specific circumstances. Maybe that means building genuine relationships with key players. Maybe it means demonstrating competence in ways that get noticed. Maybe it means creating opportunities outside this organization while maintaining your position. The key is that your strategy emerges from clear-eyed assessment, not from ideological commitment. You're not trying to prove that merit matters or that everything is corrupt. You're trying to achieve your objective as efficiently as possible. This is what separates the Machiavellian from both the naive and the cynical. The naive believe the world should work a certain way and are constantly disappointed. The cynical believe the world is irredeemably corrupt and become paralyzed or destructive. The Machiavellian sees the world as it is and works with that reality. And here's the part that really challenges people. Machiavelli understood that perception often matters more than reality. It's not enough to be powerful. You must be perceived as powerful. It's not enough to be competent. You must be perceived as competent. This is why he spent so much time discussing reputation, appearance, and public opinion. The red pill community often rebels against this, insisting that reality is what matters, not perception. But this is naive. In human affairs, perception shapes reality. If people perceive you as weak, you become weak regardless of your actual capabilities. If people perceive you as trustworthy, you gain opportunities regardless of your actual character. Machiavelli wrote that everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. This isn't cynicism, it's observation. Most people form opinions based on limited information, social proof, and cognitive biases. They don't have the time, access, or capability to truly know you. So they rely on signals, appearances, and narratives. The strategic individual manages these signals deliberately, not through deception necessarily, but through understanding what information matters and how it's interpreted. Think about modern social media. Your actual life might be mundane, but your curated online presence can project success, happiness, or expertise. Is this fake? Not exactly. You're simply choosing which aspects of reality to emphasize. Everyone does this whether they admit it or not. The difference is that most people do it unconsciously, seeking validation and approval. The Machiavellian does it strategically, shaping perception to serve specific objectives. This applies to everything from personal branding to political campaigns to relationship dynamics. The person who understands perception management has a massive advantage over those who naively believe truth speaks for itself. Truth doesn't speak for itself. Truth is interpreted through frameworks, biases, and existing beliefs. If you want your truth to be heard, you need to package it in ways that bypass resistance and align with how people actually process information. This is why Machiavelli emphasized the importance of appearing to have virtues like mercy, faith, integrity, and humanity. Notice he said appearing, not necessarily possessing. His point wasn't that you should be dishonest. His point was that possessing virtues without the appearance of them gains you nothing. And sometimes the appearance without the substance serves your objectives better than the substance without the appearance. This makes people uncomfortable because we're taught that authenticity is paramount. But authenticity is itself a performance. The person who claims to be completely authentic is simply unaware of how they're performing authenticity. We're all managing impressions all the time. The question is whether we do it consciously and strategically, or unconsciously and reactively. Machiavelli chose consciousness and strategy. And this brings us to one of his most misunderstood principles. Is it better to be loved or feared? Most people know Machiavelli's answer. It's better to be feared if you cannot be both. But they miss the nuance. He immediately clarifies that you must avoid being hated. Fear without hatred is strategic. Fear with hatred is dangerous. Love is wonderful, but unreliable, because it depends on others' goodwill. Fear is more dependable, because it depends on people's self-interest in avoiding punishment. But the ideal is to be both loved and feared, respected and appreciated. This requires sophisticated social intelligence. You need to be strong enough that people don't test you, but generous enough that they don't resent you. You need to be predictable in your principles, but flexible in your methods. You need to reward loyalty and punish betrayal consistently. This balance is what most people fail to achieve. They're either too soft and get exploited, or too hard and create enemies. The Machiavellian calibrates their approach based on context and relationship. With some people, generosity works. With others, firm boundaries are necessary. The key is reading people accurately and responding appropriately. And this is where we get to the heart of why pills are irrelevant. The entire red pill, blue pill framework assumes you're a passive recipient of reality. You take a pill and reality is revealed to you. But Machiavelli understood that effective people don't receive reality, they construct it. Not in a delusional way, but in recognizing that social reality is negotiable. The rules aren't fixed, they're enforced by consensus and power. If you have enough power or influence, you can change the rules. If you understand the consensus, you can shift it. This is what actual power players do. They don't argue about which pill shows true reality. They create the reality that serves their interests and convince others it's natural and inevitable. Think about how this works in practice. A company doesn't accept market conditions. It tries to shape them through innovation, marketing, and lobbying. A political movement doesn't accept the current discourse. It tries to shift the Overton window. A social media influencer doesn't accept their audience's preferences. They cultivate and guide those preferences. In each case, the effective actor is shaping reality rather than simply reacting to it. This is the Machiavellian protocol. Understand the current reality clearly and without illusion. Identify the leverage points where reality can be shifted. Deploy strategies that move reality toward your objectives. Adapt as circumstances change and new information emerges. Notice that this requires both clear-eyed realism and creative agency. You need to see things as they are, not as you wish they were. But you also need to recognize that how things are is not how things must remain. A blue pill taker accepts reality as given and tries to fit into it. The red pill taker sees through certain illusions, but often becomes trapped in reactive cynicism. The Machiavellian sees reality clearly, and then asks how it can be shaped to serve their purposes. This is why Machiavelli studied history so extensively. He wanted to understand how power actually works across different contexts and time periods. He wasn't looking for moral lessons. He was looking for patterns, principles, and strategies that prove effective. What he found was that human nature remains remarkably consistent. The same psychological principles that worked in ancient Rome work today. The same power dynamics that governed Renaissance Italy govern modern corporations. The technology changes, the scale changes, but the underlying mechanics of influence, persuasion, and control remain the same. This is simultaneously depressing and empowering. Depressing because it means humans are more predictable and manipulable than we'd like to believe. Empowering because it means these patterns can be studied, understood, and utilized. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You need to understand how the wheel works and apply that understanding to your specific circumstances. This is what the Machiavelli protocol offers. Not a new ideology to adopt, but a framework for thinking strategically about power and influence. Not a pill that reveals hidden truth, but a method for navigating reality as it actually exists. And here's what makes this approach truly dangerous to those who benefit from your confusion. When you stop identifying with ideologies and start thinking strategically, you become unpredictable. When you stop seeking validation for your beliefs and start focusing on effective action, you become powerful. When you stop playing the games others design and start designing your own games, you become ungovernable. This is what they don't want you to understand. The entire culture war, the political tribalism, the social media outrage, it's all designed to keep you playing predetermined roles. Red pill, blue pill, left, right, woke, based. It doesn't matter which team you choose. What matters is that you've chosen a team, and now your behavior is predictable. Machiavelli would never choose a team. He would assess which team serves his objectives in each specific context and act accordingly. And he would feel no cognitive dissonance about supporting different teams in different situations, because his loyalty is to his objectives, not to the team. This level of strategic flexibility terrifies people because it challenges their need for consistency and identity. But consistency is overrated. Circumstances change, information changes, and optimal strategies change. The person who remains consistent in changing circumstances is a fool, not a hero. Now let's address the elephant in the room that makes people deeply uncomfortable with Machiavellian thinking. Doesn't this approach justify terrible behavior? Doesn't it lead to a world where everyone manipulates everyone else? These are fair questions that deserve serious answers. First, Machiavelli's principles describe how power actually works, not how it should work. Rejecting these principles doesn't make them less true. It just makes you less aware of how you're being influenced. Second, understanding manipulation doesn't require you to manipulate others, but it does allow you to recognize when you're being manipulated. This is defensive knowledge that protects you from exploitation. Third, the alternative to strategic thinking isn't moral purity. It's naive vulnerability. The world contains people who will absolutely use Machiavellian principles against you. Your refusal to understand these principles doesn't make you noble. It makes you a victim. Fourth, Machiavellian thinking can serve ethical objectives. If your goal is to create positive change, understanding power dynamics makes you more effective. Moral intentions without strategic capability accomplish nothing. Strategic capability in service of moral intentions can change the world. The question isn't whether to understand power. The question is what you do with that understanding. Machiavelli himself was trying to save Florence from foreign domination and internal chaos. His methods were ruthless because the situation demanded it. But his objective was the security and prosperity of his city. This is the nuance that gets lost in simplified interpretations. Machiavelli wasn't advocating for cruelty for its own sake. He was advocating for effectiveness in achieving your objectives. If your objectives are selfish and destructive, Machiavellian principles will make you more effectively selfish and destructive. If your objectives are constructive and beneficial, these same principles make you more effectively constructive and beneficial. The principles themselves are neutral tools. Your objectives determine whether you use them for good or ill. This is why the red pill, blue pill framework is ultimately childish. It assumes there's a good side and a bad side, an enlightened choice and an ignorant choice. Reality is far more complex. There are multiple games being played simultaneously, with different rules, different players, and different stakes. Your job isn't to choose the right pill. Your job is to understand which games you're playing, what you're trying to achieve, and what strategies serve those objectives. Sometimes that means cooperation and trust. Sometimes that means competition and strategic deception. Sometimes that means opting out of certain games entirely. The wisdom is in knowing which approach fits which situation. And this brings us to perhaps Machiavelli's most important insight, the one that ties everything together and explains why pills are irrelevant. Machiavelli understood that fortune, circumstances beyond your control, plays a huge role in outcomes. You can be brilliant and still fail if circumstances are against you. You can be mediocre and succeed if circumstances favor you. This is why he emphasized Vertk, the capability to recognize and seize opportunities when they appear. Most people wait for perfect circumstances. They take pills hoping for revelation that will make everything clear. They seek the one true path that guarantees success. But Machiavelli knew there are no guarantees. There's only preparation meeting opportunity. Your job is to develop capabilities, understand principles, and stay alert for moments when action can shift outcomes. You can't control fortune, but you can position yourself to benefit when fortune turns favorable. You can't predict every circumstance, but you can develop the flexibility to adapt to changing circumstances. This is the real reality check. Life is uncertain, power is fluid, and outcomes depend on factors beyond your control. But within that uncertainty, there's tremendous room for agency, strategy, and influence. The people who succeed aren't those who found the right pill. They're those who developed the right capabilities and deployed them strategically. So where does this leave you? If you've made it this far, you're already different from most people. Most people want simple answers, clear teams to join, and validation for their existing beliefs. You're here because you want something more sophisticated. You want to understand how things actually work beneath the comforting narratives. So let's get practical. How do you actually implement the Machiavellian protocol in your daily life? First, start with ruthless self-assessment. What are your actual objectives? Not what you think they should be, but what you actually want. Most people lie to themselves about this. They claim to want success, but actually want comfort. They claim to want truth, but actually want validation. They claim to want freedom, but actually want security. Get clear on what you actually want, even if it's uncomfortable to admit. Second, assess your current reality without illusion. Where are you actually positioned in the various hierarchies that matter to you? What resources do you actually control? What skills do you actually possess? What relationships do you actually have? Not what you wish were true. What is demonstrably true? Third, identify the gap between your current reality and your objectives. This gap represents the work you need to do. Most people either deny the gap exists or feel overwhelmed by its size. Neither response is strategic. Acknowledge the gap clearly, and then break it down into manageable components. Fourth, study the specific domains where you need to operate. If your objectives involve career advancement, study how power works in your industry. If your objectives involve relationships, study actual relationship dynamics, not idealized versions. If your objectives involve wealth, study how wealth is actually created and preserved. In each case, you're looking for patterns, principles, and strategies that prove effective. You're not looking for what should work according to theory. You're looking for what does work in practice. Fifth, experiment strategically. Test different approaches on a small scale before committing fully. Pay attention to what actually produces results, not what feels right or aligns with your identity. Be willing to abandon strategies that don't work, even if you're invested in them. Be willing to adopt strategies that do work, even if they challenge your self-image. Sixth, build optionality. Never become so committed to one path that you can't pivot if circumstances change. Maintain multiple relationships, multiple skills, multiple income sources when possible. The person with options has power. The person without options is vulnerable. Seventh, manage perception deliberately. Understand how you're perceived in different contexts and by different people. Shape that perception strategically without becoming inauthentic. Remember, you're always projecting some image. The question is whether you do it consciously or unconsciously. Eighth, study psychology relentlessly. Understand cognitive biases, social dynamics, persuasion principles, and decision-making processes. The more you understand how people actually think and behave, the more effectively you can navigate social reality. Ninth, practice strategic detachment. Don't become emotionally invested in beliefs, identities, or strategies. Hold them lightly enough that you can change them when circumstances demand it. Your ego is not your friend in strategic thinking. 10th, accept that this is a lifelong practice, not a destination. You never arrive at complete mastery. You're always learning, adapting, and refining your approach. The moment you think you've figured everything out, you've stopped growing. Now, I know some of you are thinking this sounds exhausting. And you're right. It is more demanding than taking a pill and joining a tribe. But that's exactly the point. Effective power requires effort, awareness, and continuous adaptation. The pills offer easy answers precisely because easy answers keep you controllable. The Machiavellian protocol offers no such comfort. It offers capability, agency, and the possibility of actually shaping your reality. But it demands that you grow up and take responsibility for your outcomes. No more blaming the system, the other gender, the elites, or whatever enemy your chosen pill identifies. You're responsible for navigating reality as it exists and achieving your objectives within that reality. This is simultaneously terrifying and liberating. Terrifying because you can't hide behind ideology or victimhood. Liberating because you're no longer waiting for someone else to save you or for circumstances to magically improve. You become the active agent in your own life. And this is what truly powerful people understand. The final piece of the Machiavellian protocol that we need to address is perhaps the most controversial. Machiavelli understood that sometimes you need to do things that appear wrong to achieve outcomes that are right. He gave the example of a prince who must sometimes be cruel to prevent greater cruelty. A leader who executes a few conspirators quickly prevents a civil war that would kill thousands. This consequentialist thinking makes people deeply uncomfortable. We're taught to focus on the morality of our actions, not just their outcomes. But Machiavelli would ask, what good are pure intentions if they lead to terrible results? What value is there in feeling morally superior while everything falls apart around you? This doesn't mean the ends always justify the means. It means you need to consider both means and ends, not just one or the other. Sometimes the most moral choice is the one that produces the best outcome, even if the action itself seems questionable. Other times, certain means are so destructive that no end can justify them. The wisdom is in making these distinctions thoughtfully, rather than following rigid rules. Think about this in modern contexts. A manager who avoids firing an incompetent employee because it feels mean might destroy team morale and company performance. A parent who never disciplines their child because they want to be liked might raise an entitled, dysfunctional adult. A leader who always seeks consensus might paralyze their organization when decisive action is needed. In each case, the comfortable choice feels right, but produces wrong outcomes. The uncomfortable choice feels wrong, but produces right outcomes. Machiavelli would choose effectiveness over comfort every time. This is why he's so often misunderstood and vilified. People want to believe that doing the right thing always feels right. But reality doesn't work that way. Sometimes doing the right thing feels terrible. Sometimes it requires you to be the villain in someone else's story. Sometimes it means accepting that you'll be misunderstood, criticized, or hated. The question is whether you have the strength to do what's necessary anyway. This is where most people fail. They need to be liked, to be seen as good, to maintain their self-image as a moral person. These needs make them manipulable. If I know you need to be liked, I can control you by threatening to withdraw approval. If I know you need to see yourself as moral, I can control you by framing my desired outcome as the moral choice. A Machiavellian is free from these vulnerabilities because their self-worth doesn't depend on others' approval. They know who they are and what they're trying to achieve. They'll accept being misunderstood if that's the price of effectiveness. This doesn't mean being needlessly antagonistic or cruel. It means being willing to be unpopular when necessary. And here's what's fascinating about this approach. When you stop needing approval, you often gain more respect. People sense when you're authentic versus when you're performing for approval. They sense when you're operating from strength versus from neediness. Counterintuitively, the person who doesn't need to be liked is often more liked than the person desperately seeking approval. This is another Machiavellian paradox. By releasing your attachment to outcomes, you often achieve better outcomes. By stopping your need for control, you gain more control. By accepting that you can't please everyone, you become more effective at achieving your actual objectives. These paradoxes confuse people who think in binary terms, but they make perfect sense when you understand strategic psychology. Now, as we approach the end of this exploration, I want to address what might be going through your mind. Some of you are excited because this framework gives you tools you've been seeking. Some of you are uncomfortable because it challenges beliefs you've held. Some of you are skeptical because it seems too cynical or immoral. All of these reactions are valid. But I want you to consider one final point. Everything I've shared today is descriptive, not prescriptive. I'm describing how power actually works, not telling you how you should use that knowledge. Machiavelli himself was describing the mechanics of political power in Renaissance Italy. He wasn't creating those mechanics. He was observing and documenting them. The same is true here. Social dynamics, power structures, and influence patterns exist whether you acknowledge them or not. Understanding them gives you choices you wouldn't otherwise have. You can choose to use this understanding ethically. You can choose to use it to protect yourself from manipulation. You can choose to use it to achieve objectives that benefit others. Or you can choose to reject it entirely and continue operating on assumptions that may or may not reflect reality. The point is that it becomes a choice rather than unconscious conditioning. And this is ultimately what the Machiavellian protocol offers. Not a new set of beliefs to adopt, but a framework for thinking clearly about power, influence, and strategic action. Not a pill that reveals hidden truth, but a method for testing what actually works in your specific circumstances. Not a tribe to join, but a path of individual development and strategic capability. The red pill promises to show you how the world really works. The blue pill promises comfort and belonging. Machiavelli promises nothing except that reality operates according to principles you can study and understand. What you do with that understanding is entirely up to you. Your objectives determine whether this knowledge serves constructive or destructive ends. Your character determines whether you use it with wisdom or recklessness. Your circumstances determine which specific strategies are most relevant. But the knowledge itself is neutral, a tool that can be used in multiple ways. So here's my challenge to you. Stop looking for pills, teams, or ideologies to join. Start developing the capability to think strategically about your actual circumstances. Stop seeking validation for your beliefs. Start testing what actually produces the results you want. Stop waiting for someone to reveal the truth to you. Start observing reality carefully and drawing your own conclusions. This is harder than taking a pill. It requires ongoing effort, uncomfortable honesty, and willingness to be wrong. But it's also the only path to genuine agency and power. Everything else is just another form of following someone else's script. The Machiavelli protocol isn't about becoming manipulative or immoral. It's about becoming conscious, strategic, and effective. It's about understanding the game well enough to decide which games you want to play and which you want to avoid. It's about developing the capability to shape your reality rather than simply reacting to it. And ultimately, it's about growing up and taking full responsibility for your life and outcomes. No more pills. No more waiting to be saved. No more blaming external forces for your situation. Just clear-eyed assessment, strategic thinking, and deliberate action. This is what Machiavelli understood 500 years ago. This is what remains true today. And this is what will continue to be true, regardless of what new pills or ideologies emerge. The principles of power, influence, and strategic action are timeless. The only question is whether you'll study them or remain ignorant of how you're being influenced. I know which choice Machiavelli would make. I know which choice leads to agency versus victimhood. And now you know too. What you do with this knowledge is up to you. But you can never again claim you didn't know the game was being played. Welcome to reality. No pills required. If you're ready to take these strategies beyond theory, check the pinned comment. The link I left there is the next step to becoming truly untouchable.